Sarah Katherine Dugan did not become a judge, yet Wendi Adelson has still not been arrested. So, in my last video, I hypothesized that the reason that Wendi had not yet been arrested was not due to Sarah Katherine Dugan perhaps becoming a judge, and was also not due to the state of Florida wanting to wait until the Markel boys finished their semester in school because they did not want to interrupt them in the middle of the school semester and then charge their mother with murder. Many of you were quick to point out that prior to my last video, prior to my recording it, Sarah Katherine Dugan had already been determined to have not become a judge. So, if anything, that proves that hypothesis correct. But I'm not here to boast about how brilliant I am, because many of you probably think I'm not so brilliant. I wanted to actually come with a little bit of a different perspective. Let me back up. What do I mean? Now, this is all just speculation. I don't know. I do not have any inside knowledge as to why the state of Florida has not yet arrested Wendi Adelson. I was trying to make the point in my last video that it's not a slam dunk, that the mere fact that they convicted Donna, they convicted Charlie, does not necessarily automatically mean it's a slam dunk. I think there's many, many hurdles that the state has to get over to convict Wendi. Can it be done? I'm still not sure that evidence is all the way there yet. I will say, many of you have posted a lot of comments, giving me a lot of great feedback, which has shifted my thinking a little bit. Okay, what do I mean? So there's a couple more pieces of evidence that are also very damning for Wendi. The question is, how will the jury be able to hear that evidence, if at all? Again, I think Wendi is going to have a much better legal team than her brother and her mother. We already know that one of her attorneys also represented President Trump. So, shows you the caliber of attorneys that she's hiring are already probably on the much higher end than her brother and her mother. All right. What is the actual evidence that we have? And again, I'm not going to rehash the evidence from my last video. And I'm not even going to get into every piece of evidence that's out there. But there's a couple of large pieces of evidence that have been talked about a lot on the podcasts. And I wanted to address them and just walk you through what are the procedural hurdles that the state has to get through to introduce that evidence and even get that evidence to the jury. Because you and I might know that there's something out there that looks very damning for Wendi, but if the jury cannot hear that evidence, then it doesn't matter what you and I think. Number one, Stephen Webster, who was Dan Markel's attorney in the family law proceedings, he has not yet testified in any of the trials to date, but he has given a number of interviews on Surviving the Survivor, due to the YouTube Lawyers, a great channel, and he's been making the rounds. And a couple of things that he has spoken about, which are very damning for Wendi. One, he said, Stephen Webster, that he was convinced and that he had evidence that Wendi Adelson had submitted fraudulent affidavits. An affidavit is a sworn statement that you're presenting to the court. And it's the same as if you're giving an oral testimony in front of a judge and a jury. And if you make a false statement on that written affidavit, it carries with it the penalty of perjury. And you could be potentially criminally prosecuted for perjury. So it's very serious. And Stephen Webster said in his interviews that he was of the belief, based on evidence that he had, that Wendi had lied on several affidavits to the court regarding her assets. Stephen Webster also said that he had told Wendi's lawyer that he was getting ready to file this with the court, and show the court how Wendi had committed perjury. And that could have terrible ramifications on Wendi's ability to practice law. Because if you're an attorney and you get charged with a crime, that can have a very serious impact on your ability to keep your law license. And even if she's not charged with a crime, the mere fact that there's this kind of evidence out there, even if it does not rise to criminal conduct, it's certainly, if it can be proven that she made a false statement on an affidavit, that could be grounds for the bar committee. The bar committee is the state body that governs lawyers, and that could be grounds for them to investigate Wendi Adelson and her ability to continue to hold her law license. And he said, Stephen Webster said, that he gave a deadline to Wendi's attorney and said, if we do not have a settlement by such and such date, then I'm going to file this with the court showing how Wendi committed fraud. The deadline that Stephen Webster said he gave to Wendi Adelson's attorney was the very date that Dan Markel was shot and killed. Okay. Very damning. Incredibly damning. It establishes motive as if there was already not enough motive. Okay, but here's the question. Question A. Can that evidence get before a jury? There's a reason Stephen Webster did not testify previously in the other trials. I don't know what the reason is, but I'm going to hypothesize. And my hypothesis is that it's not a slam dunk that Stephen Webster can get every bit of testimony in that the state would want him to get in. There's specific rules that have to be met of evidence. One of them is called hearsay. Hearsay means very simply an out-of-court statement that's made to prove the truth of the matter asserted. What does that mean in plain English? It means that the person who is actually saying something has to be in court to testify. In other words, I cannot say that Chauncey Billups told me that he didn't do anything wrong in the NBA gambling scandal. I have to testify that I personally know that Chauncey Billups didn't do anything wrong because I've personally examined all of his financials. That would be the correct way. What does that mean here? And I'm sorry, one more big piece I want to get into, and that is relevance. If something is completely irrelevant, you cannot bring it in front of a jury, right? Like, I cannot bring in front of a jury the fact that the Dolphins have never won a playoff game in the last 20 plus years. That's irrelevant, even though every jury in Florida, every jury specifically in Tallahassee, would be thrilled to hear that because they're all Tampa Bay Bucks fans and they probably hate the Dolphins, but it's irrelevant. It's got nothing at all to do with the trial. So what lawyers for defense, Wendi Adelson, would argue is that Stephen Webster's testimony about financial dealings that were allegedly but never proven to be false are irrelevant because it has nothing to do with establishing whether or not Wendi was a part of this criminal activity. Now, I know what you're thinking. Everyone's going to jump on me and say, yes, it establishes her motive. Well, let's take a step back. Is that enough? The theory has been up to date with Donna Adelson, with Charlie Adelson, that the motive was not Wendi's financial misdeeds, but was rather that they wanted custody over the children. So now this is seemingly a brand new theory. And they're going to say, well, which is it? Pick your poison. Is it that Wendi um, was trying to cover up her financial crimes by lying to the court? Or was it that she wanted to have custody over the kids? Well, the state would argue they're both motives. A defense would say, well, this also has never been proven. And we add on another layer, another evidentiary hurdle, in that it's speculative, right? There was never any proof. When I say there was never any proof, what I mean is it was never adjudicated in front of a court that Wendi had said something false. If this was the belief of the attorney for Dan Markel. Now, what did he base his belief on? So in the interviews, he has not gotten into specifics. I imagine he's probably going to have to give more detail in a actual trial as to what the basis was for his belief. But even so, we don't know what that was. He has not, at least to my knowledge, and drop me a note in the comments if you think that he has given more specifics about what are the specific um, uh, false statements that Wendi gave. But the point is, it's not going to be an easy burden for the state to get everything that Stephen Webster has said on a podcast into evidence at a trial. It's not going to be, I think, an easy battle to get him to testify at all in the trial. Now, what else has Stephen Webster said? He also said another piece of evidence, also very damning. And believe me, I'd love for this evidence to come into trial because I think it shows how corrupt Wendi is. But we know a defense will fight like hell. And the prosecution will fight like hell too. But I think what they're trying to do is just make sure they have everything wrapped up in a nice tight bow before they bring the charges against Wendi. Now, the other piece of damning evidence is Stephen Webster testified. I'm sorry, he did not testify. He said in one of his interviews, I think this was actually a little bit of an old interview with Judy, the YouTube lawyer, who's also has a great channel. I know a lot of you guys have come to my channel from her channel. Me and Judy actually did a live stream together a while back. She does great work. I encourage everyone to go check out her channel. But I dug up an interview that she did with Stephen Webster. This was about a year ago. And the other thing that Stephen Webster said was that about a week after Dan Markel's murder, he got a call from a doctor's office in Miami. And the doctor's office said to him something to the effect of, oh, the mother, Wendi Adelson, is here with her kids, and the kids need to get treatment, but they need your consent. And he was like very taken aback, like, what's going on? He's like, well, I don't know if I have the authority to give consent on behalf of a deceased client, but, sure, if the kids need treatment, I want them to get whatever treatment they need. I'm not going to stand in the way. So yeah, go ahead. If they need treatment, go ahead and treat them. And then what happened next really just completely shocked him. They said, oh, no, it's nothing urgent. It's just that, we're a doctor's office, a pediatrician here in Miami, and Wendi Adelson has brought the kids here to this pediatrician's office in Miami because she wants to get this a week after the father of her kids have been murdered. She wants to change the pediatrician from Tallahassee to its doctor in Miami. That's all. Just wants to change the primary care to a doctor in Miami. Nothing urgent. So 1 week afterwards, she's moving the kids to a doctor's office in Miami as if nothing had happened. Again, very damning to Wendi. There's a problem though. If you recall, what did I just say? One of the barriers to getting something into evidence is hearsay. Hearsay is when you say something out of court, and the person who said that statement is not there to testify, and you use it to try to prove that that statement was true, to prove the truth of the matter asserted. The pediatrician's office telling something to Stephen Webster, and then Stephen Webster testifying as to what this pediatrician's office told him over the phone is classic hearsay. And that's exactly what the defense would argue to try to keep that testimony out. The pediatrician's office would have to be the ones to come into court and testify, yes, on such and such date, Wendi brought her two kids here. And yes, she did it because she was trying to change the kids from Tallahassee to Miami. And I know that because I, Mr. or Mrs. So-and-so, was personally there at such and such time. I personally reviewed the forms. I personally spoke to Wendi Adelson. This is what Wendi told me, and so on and so forth. Again, there's still a little bit of hearsay because if the person from the pediatrician's office says, oh, this is what Wendi told me, that's also hearsay. But they can still testify, I was personally there on such and such date, and we have this record and that record, and so on and so forth. But now to get Stephen Webster to testify, it's not going to be easy. It will not be easy. So where do we go from here? My point is not to say, oh, there has not been any evidence established. The evidence that we've heard on the podcast that's been discussed in this, and it's not to knock the podcasts. I'm one of them, right? I love the podcasts. They're great. But we have to remember that not every interview you hear in a podcast is necessarily something that will be admissible in court. And that is what the prosecution has to jump through those hurdles. And I think they're trying to do it. I think that when I said that they've not indicted her yet because there's not enough evidence, I was not trying to imply that there will never be enough evidence or they're not trying to build a case. It's just, let's have patience. It's a long process. The state of Florida wants to make sure they get it right. And they're trying to build the case. And there are more pieces to the puzzle that have to come in to convict Wendi over and above the pieces of the puzzle that were used to convict Donna Adelson and Charlie Adelson. That's all I got for now. Let me know what you guys think. Drop a note in the comments. Remember to like, comment, subscribe, and we'll see everybody next time.